February 3rd, 1889. A muddy back road in Oklahoma Territory. A woman rides alone on her favorite mare, Venus, through the cold winter afternoon. She's wearing a black velvet riding habit and a plumed hat because even on a grocery run, she's making an entrance. 2 shotgun blasts from behind, she falls. And just like that, 2 days before her 41st birthday, the woman they called the Bandit Queen is gone. Nobody was ever convicted. But here's what gets me. The list of suspects. Her tenant, her new husband, her own son, her daughter. The woman had so many people in her life with possible motive that investigators basically threw up their hands. And when you look at her Aquarius chart, that chaos makes perfect sense because this is a woman who spent her entire life collecting outlaws like other people collect houseplants. Jesse James hid at her ranch. The younger brothers, childhood friends. She married 3 criminals, possibly 4. Named her home after a famous outlaw and walked into Judge Isaac Parker's courtroom, the hanging judge, and walked out with just 9 months. Keep that detail in mind because it explains everything about how an Aquarius operates under pressure. And wait until you hear about the rumored affair with Cole Younger and which famous outlaw supposedly fathered her daughter. That Venus placement behavior is going to explain so much. If you're obsessed with understanding wild historical figures through astrology, hit subscribe, drop a like if you're ready for this story. And real talk. Do you think Belle Starr was a visionary who rejected society's rules ahead of her time, or just chaos in a velvet dress? Drop your take in the comments because I genuinely want to know where you stand on this one. So, Belle Starr, born February 5th, 1848. Sun in Aquarius. We don't have a birth time, so no moon or rising, but honestly, her sun sign alone explains everything about this woman. Aquarius is the rebel of the Zodiac, ruled by Uranus, the planet of revolution, disruption, and doing things your own way. These are the people who look at society's rules and go, no, thank you, not for me. They're independent to the point of seeming cold. They value freedom above almost everything else. They're attracted to outcasts, misfits, and anyone else living outside the mainstream. And here's the paradox that makes Aquarius so fascinating. They can genuinely care about humanity as a concept while struggling to connect emotionally with individual humans. They're the sign that will fight for justice and equal rights while also refusing to show up to their best friend's birthday party because they needed alone time. The shadow side. Emotional detachment that can read as cruelty. Stubbornness that makes them impossible to sway once they've decided something. A tendency to rebel just for the sake of rebelling, even when it actively harms them. They'd rather die than change their minds. And Belle Starr. She lived every single one of these traits to the extreme. Remember that stubbornness thing when we get to her standing before the hanging judge. Now let's talk about how this chart showed up from day one. Myra Maybelle. Shirley, they called her May, was born on her family's farm near Carthage, Missouri. Her father, John Shirley, was considered the black sheep of a well-to-do Virginia family. Already, we're seeing where she gets it. Her mother, Elizabeth Hatfield Shirley, as in related to the Hatfields of the famous Hatfield-McCoy feud. This woman was born from chaos on both sides. The Shirleys prospered in Missouri, eventually building an inn, a tavern, a livery stable, and a blacksmith shop. They basically owned an entire city block in Carthage. Little May attended the Carthage Female Academy, where she excelled at piano, Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. She was being raised to be a proper Southern lady. But here's where the Aquarius kicks in. While other girls were practicing their curtsies, May was out riding horses with her older brother, Bud. He taught her to shoot. He taught her to hunt. By all accounts, she became a crack shot with both pistol and rifle and could outride most men. Classic Aquarius rejection of gendered expectations. The Academy wanted her to be refined. She wanted to be dangerous. And the thing is, she was both. She could play piano beautifully and then go shoot dinner. That duality is so characteristically Aquarian, they refused to be just one thing. Then the Civil War happened, and this is where everything changes. Her brother Bud joined Quantrill's Raiders, the notorious Confederate guerrilla group known for brutal tactics along the Kansas-Missouri border. The same group that Jesse and Frank James and the younger brothers rode with. May idolized these men. She saw them as romantic heroes fighting for the South. Some accounts say she even served as a spy alongside her brother, though that's never been fully verified. What is verified is that in June 1864, Bud Shirley was killed by Union troops while eating a meal at a Confederate sympathizer's home. He was 21 years old. The Aquarius response to grief? Radicalization. This wasn't just losing a brother, this was losing the person who taught her to be wild, to be free, to be something other than what society expected, and it hardened something in her permanently. Her father, devastated, sold everything and moved the family to Scion, Texas. And that move? That's when the outlaws started showing up. That pattern of surrounding herself with criminals she sees as freedom fighters. It starts right here. Remember this moment because it explains every choice she makes for the rest of her life. In Texas, the Shirley farm became a haven for former Confederate guerrillas on the run. The James brothers, the younger brothers, all those men who had ridden with Quantrill and were now robbing banks and trains and stagecoaches. They'd stop at the Shirley place to hide from the law, and teenage May was right there, absorbing it all. Cole Younger was one of those visitors. He'd actually been May's childhood friend back in Missouri. And here's where the scandal starts. Some sources claim Cole and May had an affair, that her daughter Pearl, born in 1868, was actually Cole Younger's child, not her husband's. Cole denied it in his autobiography, and historical records support the official version that Jim Reed was the father. But Belle herself reportedly called her daughter Pearl Younger at times, fueling decades of speculation. Whether the affair actually happened or not, the fact that the rumor stuck tells you something about how Belle presented herself. She cultivated mystery. She let people wonder. Very Aquarian move, keeping everyone guessing about who you really are. What we know for certain is that in November 1866, at 18 years old, May married Jim Reed, a childhood acquaintance from Missouri who'd ridden with Quantrill, a man who would become an outlaw. Keep that Venus pattern in mind. She married men who lived outside the law every single time. The marriage started quietly enough. Jim moved in with the Shirleys. He helped on the farm. They had Pearl in 1868, then moved to Missouri to live with Jim's family. But Jim Reed was not built for domestic life. He started running with the Cherokee outlaw Tom Starr, selling whiskey illegally, rustling cattle. He killed a man in Arkansas and became a wanted fugitive. Belle, now pregnant again, fled with him to California, where their son Eddie was born in 1871. Here's the moment that defines Belle's Aquarius nature. They're in California, Jim gets recognized, they have to flee again, and instead of being terrified, Belle seems energized. The couple split up for safety. Jim rides horseback back to Texas. Belle takes the children by stagecoach. A woman alone with two small children crossing the American West in 1871. That independence. That refusal to wait for a man to handle things. Textbook water-bearer energy. Back in Texas, Jim Reed joined multiple outlaw gangs and reportedly participated in stagecoach robberies and at least one particularly brutal incident where outlaws tortured an old Creek man until he revealed where he'd hidden $30,000 in gold. There's no evidence Belle participated in the actual robberies, but she's suspected of running a livery stable in Dallas that served as a front for selling stolen horses. Her first documented criminal enterprise. Here's where the Aquarian detachment kicks in. Jim Reed was cheating on her with another woman. He was a wanted man with a bounty on his head. He was violent and unpredictable. And Belle left him, just walked away, took herself back to her parents' farm and said no thank you to this particular chaos. In August 1874, Jim Reed was killed by a member of his own gang in Paris, Texas. Legend says Belle was brought in to identify the body and refused, denying the bounty hunter his reward. This is probably embellished, but again, the fact that people believed it tells you about her reputation. Cold, calculating, loyal only to her own code. Now watch how fast this Aquarius pivots. Jim Reed is dead. She's 26 years old with 2 children and no husband. Society says she should find another respectable man, settle down, disappear into domesticity. Instead, she leaves her children with relatives and rides into Indian territory alone. This is the moment she transforms from May Reed into Belle Starr. The Aquarius attraction to outsiders takes over completely. She gets involved with a Cherokee outlaw named Blue Duck. They even took a famous photograph together that became part of her legend. But that's just the appetizer. In 1880, she marries Sam Starr, a Cherokee man 12 years her junior whose family was notorious for horse theft, cattle rustling, and bootlegging whiskey. She's 32, he's around 20 or 21, and she doesn't care. because Sam Starr gave her what Aquarius craves most: freedom. As his wife, she could legally live on Cherokee land in Indian Territory, land where U.S. law enforcement had limited jurisdiction, land perfect for hiding outlaws. They settled on Sam's 62 acres on the Canadian River, and Belle named it Younger's Bend. Officially, it was named after Sam's father, Tom Starr, who admired the Younger gang. Unofficially, everyone assumed it was Belle's tribute to Cole Younger. Either way, naming your home after outlaws is a statement, and Belle Starr was always making statements. Younger's Bend became the outlaw Airbnb of the Old West. Jesse James hid there for months. Every horse thief, cattle rustler, and bootlegger in the territory knew they could find shelter with Belle and Sam. And Belle wasn't just harboring criminals. She was allegedly organizing them, planning operations, fencing stolen goods. The brains behind multiple rustling operations. Whether or not she personally participated in robberies remains debated, but her reputation as a criminal mastermind grew. The setup was perfect for an Aquarian mind. She wasn't out robbing stagecoaches herself. That's messy, dangerous, and frankly beneath her intellectual capacity. She was building networks, creating systems, providing infrastructure for the outlaw economy. It's the difference between being a criminal and being an entrepreneur of crime. And Belle was definitely the latter. Her ranch became essential, a node in a larger web of illegal commerce spanning multiple states and territories. Some accounts suggest she could be remarkably generous with those she favored. Outlaws down on their luck could count on Belle for food, shelter, and the occasional loan. But cross her, you were done. That Aquarian capacity for cutting people off completely, she had it in spades. She could go from welcoming you into her home to treating you like you'd never existed, and that emotional switch happened fast. Here's where the Aquarius paradox gets really interesting. Belle Starr advocated for Cherokee rights. She genuinely cared about the indigenous communities she lived among. She spoke out against white settlers encroaching on Cherokee land. That humanitarian streak that Aquarius is famous for, she had it. But she was also absolutely willing to steal from those same settlers, rob travelers, break every law that got in her way. She could fight for justice and commit injustice in the same breath. The Aquarian ability to compartmentalize is genuinely wild. Her style during this period became legendary. She rode side saddle on her beloved mare Venus, wearing black velvet riding habits and plumed hats. She carried 2 pistols with cartridge belts across her hips. Some accounts say she wore a necklace of rattlesnake rattles. She was cosplaying Outlaw Queen before anyone knew what cosplaying was. Very Aquarian. Creating an aesthetic, crafting a persona, controlling how others perceived her. She wasn't just a criminal, she was a brand. In 1883, the law finally caught up. Belle and Sam were arrested for horse theft by Bass Reeves, the legendary first black deputy U.S. Marshal west of the Mississippi. They were tried before Judge Isaac Parker in Fort Smith, Arkansas, the hanging judge, the man who sentenced 160 people to death. And here's where that Aquarian stubbornness shows up in the best possible way. Belle didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't plead for mercy. She walked into that courtroom in her finest riding outfit, looked Judge Parker in the eye, and showed zero remorse. She reportedly became a model prisoner during her 9 months in the Detroit House of Corrections. Because Aquarius doesn't see incarceration as defeat, they see it as a temporary inconvenience in their larger mission. She was indicted 3 more times after her release, but never convicted again. The woman could work a system. Remember earlier when I mentioned Aquarius knows how to operate within structures they didn't create? Belle proved it. She knew exactly how much she could get away with, and she calibrated her risks accordingly. But then December 17th, 1886 happened. Sam Starr got into a gunfight at a Christmas party with his cousin, a law enforcement officer named Frank West. Both men shot each other, both died, and Belle lost the person historians believe was the genuine love of her life. The Aquarian response, pragmatism over grief. She needed to stay on Cherokee land to keep Younger's Bend, so she immediately married Jim July Starr, Sam's relative who was about 15 years younger than her. A marriage of convenience, pure and simple. This final chapter is where the Aquarius shadow side takes full control. The marriage to Jim July was stormy. After one argument, July reportedly offered someone $200 to have Belle taken out. When they refused, he allegedly screamed that he'd do it himself and spend the money on whiskey. The relationship dynamic was pure chaos. Belle needed him to stay on Cherokee land, but clearly didn't love him, and he resented being used as a legal convenience by a woman 14 years his senior. Her relationship with her children had deteriorated into something genuinely dark. Eddie was a constant source of conflict. He was arrested for horse theft and had developed what neighbors described as a volatile temper. Some sources claim Belle routinely beat him with a bullwhip. There were disturbing rumors about the nature of their relationship that historians still debate. What's documented is that they fought constantly and violently. Meanwhile, Pearl got pregnant by a married man, and Belle tried to force her to terminate the pregnancy. When Pearl refused, Belle shipped her off to relatives in Arkansas. Pearl later became a madam in Fort Smith, running multiple brothels, and Belle was horrified. The irony is almost too perfect. A woman who harbored every outlaw in the territory, who married criminals exclusively, who flaunted society's rules her entire life, drew the line at her daughter running a brothel. That's Aquarian inconsistency at its finest. They can justify their own unconventional choices while condemning others for similar ones. Belle tried to take Pearl's baby away from her, viewing Pearl as an unfit mother. Pearl fought back. The family was imploding from every direction, and in the middle of this mess, Belle was feuding with a tenant named Edgar Watson, who rented land from her and turned out to be wanted for homicide in Florida. When she discovered this, she tried to evict him. He refused to leave. She threatened to turn him in. And then, February 3rd, 1889, 2 days before her 41st birthday, she'd accompanied Jim July partway to Fort Smith, where he was turning himself in for horse theft. They argued. She refused to pay his bail or his lawyers. She turned around to ride home alone. Someone was waiting, 2 shotgun blasts from behind, from ambush. She fell from Venus. The shooter apparently approached and fired again to make sure she was dead. Some accounts say they used her own shotgun. And here's the thing. Everyone had motive. Edgar Watson wanted her silenced before she could expose him. Jim July had just threatened to end her life himself. Eddie had years of resentment and possibly darker reasons. Even Pearl might have wanted revenge for Belle's interference in her life. The case was investigated. Watson was tried and acquitted. No one was ever convicted. The cosmic irony is almost beautiful. A woman who spent her entire life surrounded by outlaws, who cultivated an image as the most dangerous woman in the West, who rejected every conventional expectation placed on her, taken out by anonymous violence on a muddy road. The Aquarian need for freedom that attracted her to criminals also meant she could never fully trust any of them. She collected outcasts, and one of those outcasts collected her. But here's where the Aquarius superpower kicks in. She died relatively obscure outside of Texas and Indian Territory. Just a regional figure, a local legend. Then Richard K. Fox, publisher of the National Police Gazette, published a dime novel that same year, Belle Starr, the Bandit Queen, or the female Jesse James. A wildly fictionalized account that portrayed her as a beautiful Southern belle driven to crime by the tragic death of her brother. A romantic figure, a feminist icon before the term existed. The book was a sensation, and suddenly Belle Starr wasn't just a horse thief who died on a back road, she was a myth. That's the Aquarius legacy. They don't just live, they become legends. They transcend their actual accomplishments through sheer force of personality and image. Belle Starr's documented crimes were relatively minor compared to the men around her. But she became more famous than most of them because she understood something fundamental about human nature. We love an icon. We love someone who refuses to be ordinary. We love a woman in a plumed hat riding side saddle into history. Her grave at Younger's Bend features a carved image of her mare Venus, a bell, and a star. The epitaph reads, "Shed not for her the bitter tear, nor give the heart to vain regret. 'Tis but the casket that lies here. The gem that fills it sparkles yet." Pearl paid for that tombstone, the daughter Belle tried to control, whose child Belle tried to take, whose lifestyle Belle condemned. She paid to immortalize her mother. Because even after everything, the pull of Belle Starr was magnetic. That's Aquarian energy at its most intense. Even the people you hurt can't fully pull away. The aftermath of Belle's death tells us as much about her as her life did. A mixed crowd of white and Native American outlaws attended her funeral. Not a single preacher showed up to say words over her grave. The Cherokee mourners filed past her open casket and dropped in cornbread crumbs according to their custom. She was buried in her finest riding attire, clutching a pearl-handled revolver. Even in death, the aesthetic was intentional. Her son Eddie eventually became a deputy in Fort Smith. Talk about irony. And ended two outlaw brothers before being shot himself in a saloon in 1896. Pearl ran brothels in Fort Smith and Van Buren for decades, using the profits to eventually win a presidential pardon for her brother. The Starr family legacy continued for generations. In fact, Belle's marriage to Sam Starr made her an aunt to Henry Starr, who would go on to become a notorious bank robber in the early 1900s. The outlaw bloodline ran deep, and the legend only grew. Dime novels multiplied, then silent films, then talkies. Jean Tierney played her in 1941. Elizabeth Montgomery portrayed her in 1980. She's been referenced in everything from Bob Dylan songs to television westerns to modern true crime podcasts. The woman who was mostly a regional figure during her lifetime became an American myth after her death. This is what Aquarius does. They plant seeds they never see bloom. They create ripples that outlast them by centuries. Belle Starr couldn't have imagined that people would still be arguing about her in 2026, still trying to decode her motivations, still fascinated by the woman in the plumed hat. But some part of her must have known. Some part of her was always playing to an audience beyond her immediate moment. Belle Starr's Aquarius sun made her unemployable in polite society, but unforgettable in history. It made her reject every expectation, collect every outcast, cultivate every mystery. It made her cold when warmth was required and revolutionary when others were content. It made her choose freedom over safety, over family, over life itself. Think about the patterns. She lost her brother and hardened. She married an outlaw and walked away when he cheated. She lost Sam Starr and immediately remarried for practical reasons. Every time life demanded she feel something deeply, she pivoted to strategy instead. That's the Aquarian survival mechanism. Emotion is dangerous and attachment is weakness. Freedom requires distance, but the chart always catches up to you. The same detachment that protected her also isolated her. By the end, she had alienated her children, entered a loveless marriage, and surrounded herself with people who might genuinely want her gone. The freedom she valued so intensely became a kind of prison. She couldn't trust anyone because she'd never let anyone close enough to earn that trust. Would you want that chart? The independence, but also the isolation? The legend, but also the ambush on a muddy road? The ability to reject society's rules, but also the inability to form lasting emotional connections with almost anyone? The water bearer pours out wisdom for humanity, but never quite finds a place within it. Belle Starr lived that paradox for 40 years, 11 months, and 28 days. And then someone decided she'd lived it long enough. But the gem that filled that casket, it really does sparkle yet, over 135 years later, and we're still talking about her, still trying to figure out who she really was beneath the velvet and the pistols and the plumed hats. Still wondering which outlaw fathered Pearl, still debating who fired those shotgun blasts, and honestly, she would have loved that. And Aquarius doesn't want to be fully understood, they want to be endlessly fascinating. Belle Starr achieved that and then some.